Hello and welcome to Your Broken Galaxy. I am Broken, and today I am going to do my first book review. And I've decided to do it a little bit different than other Star Wars book reviews that I've seen here on YouTube. That is to say, I'm going to give a chapter-by-chapter breakdown of everything that happened. So I shouldn't have to say this, but there are super heavy spoilers in this review. The book is the first in what may be perhaps more than 100 videos that I will do in this series, but it only depends on if you guys actually want to watch it. Over the last few months, I've actually bought, I think, 82 books off of eBay, and some of them I've read before, not all of them, but I'm looking through going over just a huge number of books, which will probably take somewhere along the lines of like 10 years, but that's okay. For anyone who hasn't found my channel yet, my channel is supposed to be a comedy one, so I hope you laugh. Star Wars The Mandalorian Armor by K.W. Jeter, released in 1998, is the first book of 3 books in the Bounty Hunter Wars series. Let's get going. Chapter 1. Dengar, the frumpy-looking brown snowtrooper, after finding himself recently engaged to a woman named Manaru, heck of a name there, he ends up searching through the debris field of Jabba's sail barge, looking for, anything worth salvaging. After stupidly climbing up on top of a piece of unstable wreckage over the Sarlacc pit, like a child would, he almost finds himself falling into the Sarlacc pit, though the bounty hunter is able to save himself. Our bumbling hero goes on to find Boba Fett lying almost dead in the sand, and let me tell you the description in this book of how painful the digestive juices of the Sarlacc are on Boba, that description is on point. Anyway, Chapter 2. Paranoid billionaire businessman Kuat of the planet Kuat ends up doing some work in his office with his pet space cat. Specifically, a tiny spying machine comes flying in. It turns out this device was spying on Jabba the Hutt. He plays the 3D projected holo recording of Leia walking into Jabba's palace with Chewbacca and a little bit of her being in a metal space bikini, and he comments on how hot she is. I don't know why, but for some reason, every Star Wars book I read always mentions how every man in the galaxy thinks Leia is just the best. I don't get it. Anyway, Kuat's entire house, spaceship, even the tiny spy machine, are rigged with explosives that could kill him if he makes one wrong move, because he's so protective of the information that comes in on these little metal flying info bots that he's got. He'd rather die because his hand wasn't steady enough than let someone find out his schemes and plans. But little does he know that I, Broken, know exactly what he's doing in his little office. Anyway, this guy is looking for Boba. Chapter 3. This chapter follows Neela, a former dancing girl of Jabba's, that escapes after another dancing girl choked him out with a Kusari Jime. She is looking for Dengar's hiding spot out in the barren wastes of the Dune Sea, and of course, she finds it. She also finds 2 pretty normal and unsilly medical droids, and inside of Dengar's little hovel, she sees the man, the myth, the partially digested Boba Fett, who himself, through his drug-induced coma, is able to see the girl and remember her name. Then she just kinda leaves. Chapter 4. This starts with a sentence saying that it was now taking place after the events of Episode 4, so it's a time jump about 3 years into the past. We are looking at Bosk and Zuckuss. They are chasing down a bounty at a casino. Bosk really, really wants to kill Zuckuss instead of working with him, but he can't because they're both in the Bounty Hunters Guild. They're trying to get some guy that embezzled probably millions of credits from Jabba. Anyway, they blow the door down, and Zuckuss goes rushing in, guns ablazing, and is like, "Hey, Bosk, everybody in here's already dead," because it turns out that Boba Fett had already been in there and killed, 6 guards. Which, by the way, when I was younger, I used to think that Boba Fett was a true neutral character, that he would just happen to work for the Empire or even the Rebels, depending on how much he was paid. But, I mean, for goodness sake, he even kind of becomes that in the later books of the EU, and Disney turned him into the mayor of Tatooine. Anyway, Boba Fett is, he just killed 6 guys. So, Bosk and Zuckuss go running to their ship to fly out after Boba Fett in space, right? But Boba, he jumps away right as the two other bounty hunters are like, hey man, we were here first. Boba's like, screw you guys, and he's gone. But right before the chapter ends, he does have a brief chat with the man that he just, kidnapped, and how horrible his life is going to be, and how Boba Fett won't accept a bribe because of his reputation as a man who will kill 6 innocent casino guards, but has got a 5-star rating with the Better Business Bureau because he gets the job done. Chapter 5. Boba Fett takes the embezzler to a creature named Kedar Mubat, and that's how I have to say it because it's spelled K-A-D apostrophe A-R M-U-B apostrophe A-T. And this thing is wild. The thing is called an assembler and seems that it's like a space spider that asexually reproduces children from itself, which are connected by a neural cord back to the main body so they are simultaneously children and yet also part of its body. And if the children get too smart, then Kadar will eat them so they don't rise up in revolt. Also, his house is basically floating space debris that has been entirely joined together by the spider webs that he excretes from his own body, which are, mind you, still connected to him, making his house an extension of his body. And for some utterly ridiculous reason that the book does not go into, people use this guy as an intermediary, which is just baffling. First off, what does this thing need credits for? It's just a nightmare monster creature that checks the boxes of body horror, arachnophobia, cannibalism, and more. Where was I? What was I saying? Chapter 5. Right. This thing gives Boba Fett 12,500 credits for the guy he just captured. Which, remember, Boba Fett killed 6 men to get the embezzler. If you say that Boba recouping the prices of ammunition, ship, fuel, and his time was just a measly 500 credits, then the lives of each of those men were only 2,000 credits apiece. They died for like a month's salary. Anyway, Kedar Mubat ends up offering Boba a job to join the Bounty Hunters Guild, but Boba hates those guys, so it's gonna be expensive. Chapter 6 is the big reveal that it isn't actually Kedar Mubat that was Boba Fett to join the Bounty Hunters Guild, but in fact, it was actually Prince Shizor. Once this big reveal is over, the chapter switches pace to the scene of Boba Fett on his hands and knees with soapy water scrubbing the floor of Slave 1. The man needs himself a wife. Well, he needs to find the wife he left behind, but I guess that's another story. Chapter 7. So in this chapter, Neela, Jabba's former dancing girl, and Dengar have a nice little chat. We find out that Neela probably had her mind wiped and was maybe a high-class lady. They eventually kind of agree to work together. Chapter 8. Alright, so we find ourselves near the headquarters of the Bounty Hunters Guild, and Bosk is in a ship with just worthless of partner that he is, Zuckuss. They see Boba's ship, and despite Boba having guaranteed promises from the head of the Bounty Hunters Guild, who also happens to be Bosk's dad, the promise is saying that no one will attack Boba. Bosk totally attacks Boba. He blasts a hole right through the ship, and then he and Zuckuss go aboard to find Boba's remains, only to realize it is a decoy shell of a ship and that Boba has it booby-trapped. The two dive back onto Bosk's ships, which gets hit by 3 explosives, causing extensive damage to the ship, but they're still alive. Chapter 9 is a welcoming banquet for Boba Fett into the Bounty Hunters Guild. Bosk comes charging in all mad that Boba just totaled his ship, and he makes a big pouty show like a toddler, but his dad, who again is the leader of the whole guild, is apparently just too drunk and kind of lets it go. Chapter 10. This is another big reveal chapter with Prince Shizor. He's now in the Emperor's throne room, and Vader is attending via Zoom. Shizor lays out a big, contrived plan about how the Emperor's power causes such fear in his underlings that they become useless, and the only people that could possibly help are the bounty hunters. But unfortunately, the Bounty Hunters Guild has become weak with comfort, and it's during this chapter that I realized how obvious it was that this book was written in the 90s. Ever since Dog the Bounty Hunter came out, I think the view of the whole profession has been a little bit upended. Anyway, Shizor hired Kedar Mubat to hire Boba to join the Bounty Hunters Guild, specifically so he could destroy it from the inside. Chapter 11. So here, Boba Fett goes to his quarters, which the mental image I made while I was reading this was like a backyard steel shed with a concrete floor that is underneath another building. Bosk comes, and despite having shown nothing but hatred for Boba, as evidenced by the fact that he attempted to murder him, what seems like maybe at most a couple of hours before this encounter, he tells Boba that he should just join Bosk's side to take down Bosk's dad. The story then shifts to follow Bosk's dad's assistant, who from now on I'll refer to as Ob, because that's his name. Ob has a meeting with Bosk's dad, and it's revealed that Bosk's dad sent Bosk to Boba to recruit Boba to help him kill himself, which is maybe just a little confusing. Ob is like, Master, what if Bosk actually does want to kill you? And Bosk's dad is like, I should eat you for questioning my son's loyalty. And in the next scene, it's revealed that Ob is spying on Bosk's dad for Bosk, and is like, Bosk, dude, your dad totally trusts you not to betray him. Then the scene shifts to Boba Fett back on his door being approached by Zuckuss, and now I've not really mentioned Zuckuss all that much so far, but let me try to explain how I feel about Zuckuss at this point. To me, the characterization of Zuckuss is this, like, naive, somewhat lovable friend that's generally rather nice and maybe a little bit overweight. But for whatever reason, he's a bounty hunter. Anyway, the book doesn't actually even have the conversation between Boba and Zuckuss written in it. It just says it goes, about how Boba would expect it to go. It doesn't give any clear indication on what Zuckuss actually said. Chapter 12. So now we are back with Dengar, the dancing girl, and Neela in present day as the two robots are trying to take care of Boba. And suddenly, out of nowhere, someone starts carpet bombing the entire desert. Dengar thinks that whoever is doing it is just trying to get Boba. They are kind of deep in this cave that was Dengar's hiding place, but the place is still getting shook hard, and rocks are falling from the ceilings. They go to escape through the cave system, dragging Boba all the way, because Dengar thinks that it might end up reaching to the Sarlacc's nest, and that there's probably a way out since Boba killed it. He ends up climbing this hole towards light, but while he is up there, the girl is like, there's something down here. Chapter 13. So this chapter is a direct continuation of the one before it. Basically, despite disemboweling the Sarlacc from the inside and convincing everyone that it was dead, the thing is apparently still alive, and one of its tentacles is thrashing about in the cave underground. It's a big scene about them trying to get out of the cave. Dengar ends up tying a rope around Boba and is pulling his unconscious body up the hole towards the light, but the Sarlacc is going to get Neela, so Dengar pulls out a blaster to shoot the tentacle, but he drops it when the cave wall shakes from the Sarlacc's tentacles smashing into it. And I kid you not, the book actually describes in slow motion how Boba Fett, dangling, unconscious, and barely alive, opens his eyes and catches the blaster as it is falling past him, points the thing at the Sarlacc, and blasts it into a white-hot ooze. I mean, man, that is hardcore. That is why people like Boba. And then they climb out of the hole. The chapter then goes on to reveal that Quat of Kuat was the being behind the bombing on Tatooine, which was a little bit of a surprise because I totally forgot the guy even existed by this point. Chapter 14. So, back in the day, Bosk convinces Boba to go after a bounty, but oh no, the bounty is a guy that's a guest of shell huts. What's a shell hut, you ask? It's a hut that has encased itself in a heavy-duty metal armor around its entire body but its face. The story then shifts back to Ob, who is reporting to Bosk's dad, that Bosk had successfully recruited Boba to go after the shell hut guy. Then, who shows up to talk to Bosk's dad but none other than Zuckuss? It's basically revealed that everyone thinks that Zuckuss is a gullible moron, and Bosk's dad is trying to recruit Zuckuss to, get this, kill Bosk. When they go on this mission to get the shell hut guy, that's what Zuckuss is supposed to do. Chapter 15. Alright, In this chapter, the all-star bounty hunting team of Boba Fett, Bosk, IG-88, and Zuckuss meet up with Boba's mysterious contact, which is basically a man that has replaced his body parts with, like, a cannon. It's hard to describe him. His name is Daharhan, but I'm just gonna call him Cannon Man. Then the group all flies to the shell huts. While they are there, Boba, Zuckuss, Bosk, IG-88, and Cannon Man are standing around in Boba's ship, and a shell hut is sent to meet them to discuss terms of them landing. Now, mind you, the shell hut is a hut that, on top of its massive girth, has a suit of armor. And that thing, plus all 5 of the other people, are somehow on Boba's tiny ship. I tell you, the physics of the Star Wars galaxy are amazing. Anyway, they end up reaching an agreement that they can land on the planet so long as no one brings any weapons, which means that Boba has to perform the job of basically the equivalent to a nuclear engineer when he removes the power core from the cannon of Cannon Man, because he can't take his cannon off because his cannon is part of him and he would die. Chapter 16. So this chapter is the main event of the book. It was close to 50 pages long, and it has some rather intense scenes. It starts out with the team being hassled by the TSA as they go through customs and surrender all their weapons. Boba has a little chat with Zuckuss about how in the past he had hurt Gita. That's the name of the shell hut that came up to meet them on Boba's ship, and how the way he hurt him was by kidnapping some big important architect that Gita had wanted to build something for the huts, but then Gita was going to kill this guy so he could never build anything again and the huts would be all special. They end up going for a little stroll, and as things are unveiled, it becomes obvious that the negotiator shell hut Gita has lost his mind, and that there's a trap of mercenaries. They start coming out from these little alcoves and stuff around the exterior walls of the building, and Gita is just driving deeper into a literal drug-fueled madness during all this. Specifically, he gave himself drugs that would suppress his better judgment to show reason, that would keep himself alive during his revenge-fueled ploy. So Gita produces the dead body of the guy that Boba and the crew are there to collect, and all the other huts are gathered around in their massive metal cocoons, and they get mad because he's messing up business. But Gita doesn't care. He's essentially going around screaming, "I'm gonna kill you all!" So Boba Fett activates a bomb that was planted into the building like years before by the architect that he had saved, and then all heck breaks loose. The mercenaries start firing. The bounty hunters steal some weapons and are firing back. Boba Fett runs towards a little cache of weapons that he had the architect bury in the concrete of the building and pulls out a power core for Cannon Man. He inserts the thing into his chest, and Cannon Man starts just blasting away at everything. Boss gets shot in the chest and goes down, and Cannon Man also gets shot in the chest. The still fleshy part, not the mechanical part. And he goes down too, but he's still alive. The fight is starting to wind down. The huts by this point are totally panicked, and most of them have pulled their heads back into their metal shells like turtles and have closed the little face hole like a Stargate iris. Gita, however, has been watching, and he is finally like, "Oh dang, I better protect myself." So he pulls his head back into his shell. But as the thing is closing, Boba Fett, absolute mad lad that he is, drags Cannon Man's barely alive body over and shoves the cannon barrel into the closing iris of Gita's shell and blasts the thing. Now, mind you, this is not like some little blaster pistol that Han used or a blaster rifle that the stormtroopers used. This is a cannon. The vivid and horrifying description of this is probably the most ridiculous death scene in all of Star Wars. And let me just say, it ends with the liquefied remains of the hut dripping out of the rivets of the metal shell he was wearing. I may do a separate video devoted specifically to this death scene someday. Chapter 17 starts with Zuckuss reporting to Boss Dad that Bosk died from the blaster bolt to his chest, and it continues for a few pages with Boss Dad talking about how maybe he should just kill every single bounty hunter in the guild and start fresh. This is interspersed with Zuckuss's thoughts about the matter and his longing to see what happens. So, after Zuckuss is dismissed, Boss Dad turns around to see Bosk, and Bosk is like, yeah, that didn't kill me. And then Bosk brutally murders his dad while Zuckuss watches. Meanwhile, a revolt has started in other parts of the guild headquarters, and a lot of folks are dying. The chapter then moves back to the freaky space spider Kudar Mubat, who is feeling just super good about himself because his plan worked so well. Then the chapter ends with a bit of detail about how Boba Fett was just on Slave 1 doing minor maintenance work as he heard the war going on amidst all the other bounty hunters. So in Chapter 18, we return to the current timeline, and Boba Fett, Dengar, and Neela have escaped. Boba and Neela are hanging out for the first part of the chapter at Boba's little desert hideout where he had stashed some extra armor and weapons, and Neela just spends the whole time admiring him. This part of the chapter is followed by Dengar, who has gone into town because Boba wanted him to look for transportation. But lo and behold, Dengar is revealed to be a double-crosser, and he is betraying Boba Fett. He hires a shady guy to get a message delivered to Kuat of Kuat because Dengar found an unexploded bomb that he was able to determine belonged to him, and the message just says that Boba Fett is alive. So Dengar ends up leaving, but lo and behold, the shady messenger ends up betraying Dengar by giving the message to someone else. Chapter 19. This chapter shows Bosk showing up at Tatooine just so he can revel at the death of Boba Fett. And as he arrives, he sees, literally sees, with his eyes, Boba Fett's ship, which I know that oftentimes sci-fi writers don't know how unlikely these kinds of odds are. Seeing Slave 1 in orbit around a planet after jumping out of hyperspace would be roughly akin to jumping into the ocean at some random point and just happening to see a rubber duck that you know. Anyway, Bosk thinks that because Boba is dead, he can just steal anything he wants. Because Boba is theoretically dead, Bosk decides that he can take his time and hire a skilled decryptionist. After a little bit of time, the guy's like, hey, I'm 99% sure that this ship called Slave 1 is clean. So Bosk goes over and gets access to all of Boba Fett's info. He opens a hidden door and finds a recording from the Skywalker homestead showing Owen and Beru's charred remains, and Luke coming up as the recording indicates that a Phaelin, Prince Shizor's species, is nearby. Bosk goes back to his ship and happens to receive a package from Tatooine from the messenger that Dengar hired because, he betrayed him. He opens and reads the horrifying words Boba Fett is alive, and he passes out because he's a little girl. Chapter 20. So this chapter starts off introducing two completely new characters have seemingly found Boba, Dengar, and Neela out in the Dune Sea. One guy is like, we should just totally take them down now. They are worth enough dead, and I don't want Boba to kill us. And the other guy's like, yeah, but they're worth more alive, so let's try and capture him. And they do try, and it goes horribly. They are able to get the jump on Boba and Dengar with one of the guys in the darkness aiming his blaster at them from afar, and the other one standing right in front of them. But when Neela, with all of the fury of a woman that just found out her boyfriend thinks her friend is kind of cute, kicks him in the crotch. Boba, Neela, and Dengar hide in a little cave after that, and in a few seconds, Slave 1 just literally lands on top of these guys because Boba called it down from orbit. They end up getting on board and take off. Chapter 21, the final chapter of the book, coming in at less than 3 pages. Bosk had cleared out all of his stuff from Boba's ship before Boba called it down in the last chapter, and Bosk is just sitting in orbit. When he sees Slave 1 on his computer targeting systems, he just goes ahead and shoots it, blowing it to smithereens. Well, that is my video for today. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you think this was a good type of video. If you guys don't want to watch these book review videos, then I'm not going to spend the large amount of time it takes to write and record them. But if people do like them, then I will write these reviews because I am going to be just reading the books anyway over the next few years. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and all that garbage.